Hello, everyone. I am Tyler, 31 years old, and for as long as I can remember, I have been the dependable one in my family. The person everyone called when something needed fixing, when money ran short, or when someone needed a ride. My dad, Richard, raised me to believe that hard work and integrity were everything. He was a mechanic most of his life, and I grew up with grease on my hands and a wrench in my pocket. My mom passed away when I was 12, and for a while it was just dad and me. We were a team, quiet, practical, and close in that way where you do not say I love you all the time, but you know it is there. When I was 16, dad remarried. That is when Nancy came into the picture, along with her daughter Bree, who was 13 at the time. From the very first day, Nancy made it clear that she saw me as a reminder of dad's past, not part of her future. She was the kind of woman who had to be in control of every conversation, every decision, every emotion in the house. She called herself honest, but most of the time that just meant mean with a smile. At first, I tried to make things work. I really did. I wanted dad to be happy, and I figured if he loved her, she must have some good in her. But Nancy treated me like an intruder in my own home. When she cooked dinner, she would serve Bree first and make some comment like, Bree needs her strength. She has such a busy social life. And then glance at me and say, Tyler, you can reheat what's left later. When she did laundry, she accidentally forgot my clothes every other week. Once, she threw out my baseball glove that had belonged to my mom because she said it looked old and gross. Dad tried to smooth things over, but he never wanted to fight with her. He used to tell me, just let her have her way, son. It keeps the peace. So I learned to keep quiet, work hard, and stay out of her way. While Bree was coasting through her teenage years, I was hustling. I mowed lawns, changed oil at the local shop, and even helped my dad fix up old cars to resell. I wanted to be a police officer, and while my friends were out drinking and partying, I was taking online courses and saving every penny. Dad was proud of me, he really was, but Nancy always found a way to twist it. She would say things like, Tyler just likes playing cop. Let's see how long that lasts. Meanwhile, Bree couldn't keep a part-time job for more than 2 weeks without quitting because the manager was rude or the shifts were too early. But Nancy defended her every single time. She's young, she'd say. She's finding herself. Yeah, finding herself with my dad's credit card. I moved out the second I could. I worked my way up through the academy, did patrol, and eventually landed a job as a traffic enforcement officer in Phoenix. It is not the most glamorous position in law enforcement, but I am proud of it. I take pride in being the guy who keeps things orderly, who follows the rules, who treats people fairly. I've got my own place, a reliable truck, and a solid reputation. Over the years, I still tried to be there for my dad. When money was tight, I paid for their groceries, bought car parts, helped them fix things around the house. I never made a big deal out of it. I did it because I loved my dad, even though it often felt like I was helping Nancy more than him. Every time I showed up, Bree would be lounging on the couch, scrolling through her phone, while Nancy barked out instructions as if I were some handyman she'd hired. I never once got a thank you. Not one. Fast forward to last month. I had just finished a long week of double shifts. It was Saturday, my first real day off, and I was planning to sleep in and maybe wash my truck. Around 8 in the morning, my phone rang. It was Nancy. She did not even bother with small talk. She said, Hey Tyler, can you drive me and Bree around tomorrow? We have a few errands to run. After that, come by, we're doing a small get-together for my birthday. Her tone was sharp, casual, and entitled, like she was calling a service, not a family member. I remember laughing and saying, Nancy, I don't drive for free anymore. Either you pay me or I'll give you a ticket. I said it half jokingly, but I meant every word. There was a pause, and then she said, You wouldn't talk to your family like that. And I said, No, I'm talking to someone who only calls me when they need something. Then I hung up. Normally, that's where the guilt would hit. Normally, I'd call my dad later, apologize, and end up driving them anyway. But this time, I didn't. I was done being their free labor. The next morning, when I clocked into work, one of my coworkers from the Vehicle Enforcement Division handed me a stack of flagged files. I started flipping through them, checking the license plates and registration numbers, when something caught my eye. Nancy and Bree Dawson. I looked twice to make sure I was seeing it right. Their car, a white SUV my dad had bought for them 2 years ago, had multiple unpaid parking citations, some dating back months. They had ignored 3 mailed notices and the registration was expired. Now, I want to be clear, I did not go looking for their names. It just happened to land on my desk. But our department policy is strict. Once a vehicle hits a certain threshold of unpaid fines, it becomes eligible for impound. Normally, I would have called to give someone a heads up, but that's not my job. And certainly not when that person is my stepmother, who treats me like a personal chauffeur. The system automatically triggered the impound notice, and one of our officers assigned to that district was already nearby. By noon, their car was being towed from right in front of their house. I found out because the office received a call later from an angry woman complaining that some idiot cop had taken her car. I did not even have to ask who it was. I just smiled and kept working. Around 4 in the afternoon, my phone started going crazy. First it was my dad, then Bree, then Nancy. I ignored the first few calls. Then I got a text from my dad. The police came. They towed your mother's car? You knew about this? For a few minutes, I just stared at the message. A few years ago, that would have crushed me. I would have dropped everything, rushed over, paid the fines, and fixed the whole situation. But this time, something in me just snapped into clarity. I was tired of fixing things for people who never appreciated me. I replied simply, maybe she should have asked for a ride yesterday. I put my phone down and went back to my paperwork. That night, I sat on my porch with a cold drink, watching the sun set behind the desert skyline. I thought about how for most of my life I had been the one who stepped up, the one who sacrificed, the one who made peace even when others didn't deserve it. And for the first time, I didn't feel guilty for standing up for myself. I felt free. 2 days later, I stopped by my dad's house to drop off some paperwork he'd asked me to print. It was nothing important, just some pension forms he needed to sign and mail. I figured I'd be in and out in 5 minutes. When I pulled up to the house, the same white SUV that had been towed was gone, of course, and for a second, I wondered if they'd already managed to get it back. The place looked the same as always. Freshly trimmed bushes, a few garden gnomes Nancy insisted on keeping near the walkway, and that faded welcome friends mat that had been there since I was a teenager. The moment I knocked, the door swung open, and there she was. Nancy. Arms crossed, face tight, and that familiar look of theatrical disgust plastered across her features. She did not even wait for a greeting. She hissed through clenched teeth that I thought this was funny, that because of my little stunt, she had missed her birthday dinner and Bree had to Uber to work. She spoke like the world had collapsed because her consequences finally caught up to her. I stayed calm, like I always did when she tried to get under my skin, and told her she could have paid her tickets or called before it got that far. She rolled her eyes so hard I thought she might sprain something and said, I was just jealous because my dad actually loved her. That one hit in the way only absurd lies can. For a moment, I just looked at her and said, as evenly as I could, that my dad loved peace, and she had given him none. Her mouth opened like she wanted to fire something back, but nothing came out. I turned to leave, hoping to end the exchange before it got uglier, but as I was stepping off the porch, I heard the shuffle of feet behind me and my dad's voice calling my name. He came out from the kitchen, wiping his hands on a towel like he had been washing dishes, and I could see that uncomfortable look on his face, the one he always wore when he was caught between her and me. It was that helpless, weary expression of a man who had spent years trying to balance two sides that would never meet in the middle. He asked if I could help them get the car back just this once. His voice was soft, almost pleading, and for a second, that old instinct kicked in. The one that told me to fix things, to make his life easier, to be the good son again. But then I remembered every time I had come running before, every time Nancy had mocked me right after I helped her, every time I had swallowed my pride to keep the peace. So I said the words I never thought I would say to my father, that I enforce the law, and I do not bend it for people who treat me like a tool. It came out steady, measured, but the air between us changed immediately. His face fell. He looked smaller somehow, like he could not believe I had chosen boundaries over family obligation. I wanted to tell him that this was not about punishment or resentment, but about respect, something I had given for years without ever getting back. There was silence for a long moment, that heavy kind that fills every corner of a room even when no one's inside. Nancy disappeared somewhere behind him, probably to call Bree or to make sure I heard her muttering about how ungrateful I was. I handed my dad the paperwork, nodded once, and walked back to my truck. I didn't slam the door or speed away. I just left quietly because there was nothing left to argue about. That night, as I was sitting on my couch, watching some mindless TV, my phone buzzed. It was a text from my dad. He wrote, "You've changed." 3 words, but they landed like a punch. I stared at the message for a long time, thinking about all the years I had been his backup plan, his repairman, his buffer against Nancy's storms. I thought about how many times I had shown up at that house just to keep things from falling apart. I wanted to reply, to tell him that I hadn't changed at all, that I had just finally stopped letting them walk all over me, that growing a spine is not the same thing as becoming a stranger. But I didn't reply. A week after that confrontation at my dad's house, things had finally started to feel quiet again. I had buried myself in work, picked up a few extra shifts, and tried to keep my mind off the whole mess. I wasn't angry anymore, just tired. Tired of being the only one who ever seemed to care about doing the right thing. Tired of being the family scapegoat whenever reality caught up with them. For the first time in a long time, I was beginning to enjoy the calm that came with distance. Then on a Tuesday morning, I got a call from Officer Ramirez, a colleague who worked in our administrative division. She's sharp, level-headed, and the kind of person who always gives you the facts straight. When I saw her name flash on my phone, I figured it was about some routine paperwork. Instead, her voice had that particular mix of irritation and disbelief that instantly told me something was off. She said there was a funny development with one of our recent impounds, the same white SUV belonging to Nancy and Bree. She explained that while the registration was listed under my dad's name, the insurance wasn't. Apparently, the policy had been suspended weeks before the impound, meaning that car shouldn't have even been on the road. That alone would have been enough to make me shake my head, but then she said something that made my stomach drop. Nancy had filed a formal complaint with the department, claiming the vehicle was wrongfully impounded and that the action constituted harassment. I remember sitting there in my truck during my lunch break, listening in disbelief as Ramirez told me that Nancy had actually used my name in the complaint, accusing me of abusing my position for personal revenge. For a moment, all I could do was laugh under my breath. Not because it was funny, but because it was so absurd. Harassment? I had followed every rule, every regulation, every piece of policy that existed. The impound had been automatic, triggered by unpaid citations and an expired registration. I hadn't even touched the paperwork until after it was done. It was the system doing its job. But for Nancy, any event she didn't control had to be someone's fault, and she'd decided that someone was me. Ramirez sounded both annoyed and sympathetic as she told me that internal affairs had to log the complaint, but the review was straightforward. My supervisor got looped in, and within a few hours they had pulled every record tied to the impound. The citations, the registration, the automated notice logs, the impound authorization. Every single action was done by the book. My supervisor called me into his office later that afternoon, a calm expression on his face, and told me point blank that I had done absolutely nothing wrong. He even said, half smiling, that if anything, the situation was poetic justice. Still, hearing it officially cleared didn't feel as satisfying as I thought it would. I should have felt vindicated, but instead there was this hollow ache in my chest. The idea that my own stepmother had gone out of her way to try and weaponize my career against me was hard to swallow. She hadn't just been petty this time, she had crossed into malicious territory. She didn't just want to make me feel small, she wanted to destroy something I had spent years building, something that had nothing to do with her. What made it worse was my dad's silence. Word got around fast, and I knew he must have heard what Nancy had done, but he never reached out. No call, no text, not even a message asking for my side of the story. He had always been the kind of man who avoided conflict at all costs, but this time, his silence felt like betrayal. And when someone accuses your son of professional misconduct, the least you can do is ask what happened. Instead, I got nothing. I went over the situation in my head 100 times. Every memory of the past decade came rushing back. The times I bailed them out financially, the times I bit my tongue when Nancy humiliated me in front of Bree, the times I sacrificed my own comfort just to keep the peace for my dad's sake. And now, after everything, this was my reward. A false complaint, a smear on my name, and a father who didn't even bother to stand up for me. That night, I sat at my kitchen table staring at my phone. Their names were still in my contacts, both sitting there like two open wounds I hadn't cleaned. For years, I had been the one who always made the first move after an argument, the one who called to apologize even when I wasn't the one in the wrong. But this time, I didn't want to fix it. I didn't want to talk. I didn't want to explain. I realized that I had been clinging to the idea of family, not the reality of it. The reality was that Nancy would never see me as anything but an obstacle, and my dad would never choose me over her peace. So I opened my contacts, selected both their numbers, and pressed block. It felt small at first, almost anticlimactic, but as soon as I did it, a strange calm washed over me. The silence that followed wasn't empty, it was peaceful. I didn't have to brace myself for another manipulative phone call, another guilt trip, another reminder that I would never be enough for them. For the first time in years, I didn't carry the weight of their expectations or their chaos on my shoulders. That night, I turned off my phone, lay down, and stared at the ceiling. No buzzing notifications, no incoming calls, no tension in my chest. Just quiet. Just me. For the first time in years, I slept without guilt. A few weeks passed in complete silence after I blocked my dad and Nancy. For the first time in years, there were no guilt-driven phone calls, no sarcastic messages pretending to be apologies, no requests for help with just one small thing. I got up early, worked my shifts, hit the gym afterward, and actually started enjoying how quiet my life had become. The weight that had lived in the back of my chest for so long was finally gone. I thought that was it, that the chapter with my family had closed for good. Then, one afternoon, I got a message from Bree. It came through social media since I'd blocked her number too. The notification flashed across my screen while I was drinking coffee in the station's break room. It said, "Hey Tyler, Dad's been trying to reach you. Can you come by?" I stared at the message for a while, unsure how to feel. Bree had never been cruel in the same way her mother was, but she had stood by and watched while Nancy took digs at me, laughed at my expense, and made me feel like an outsider in my own home. Still, something about the way she worded it, short, direct, almost worried, made me hesitate before dismissing it. I could have ignored her, kept my distance, and carried on with my peaceful life. But something in my gut told me to go. When I pulled up to my dad's house, the place looked different. For one, it was quiet. The driveway was empty except for his old pickup truck. The blinds were half closed, and the flower beds Nancy had obsessed over were completely neglected. The air around the place felt lighter. When I knocked on the door, it opened almost immediately. My dad stood there, and for a moment, I barely recognized him. He looked older, his shoulders slumped, the lines on his face deeper, his eyes dull with exhaustion. He didn't say much, just stepped aside and motioned for me to come in. The living room told the story before he even spoke. Half the furniture was gone, a few empty picture frames sat on the mantel, and a pile of unopened mail sat on the coffee table. The silence in that house was heavy but different than before. It wasn't hostile, just hollow. When I asked where Nancy was, he took a deep breath and told me she was gone. Apparently, after the whole car impound situation, things between them had gone downhill fast. She had exploded at him, blamed him for raising a cop who ruined her life, and then spent the next few weeks draining his credit cards. He had tried to calm her down, tried to reason with her, but she'd already checked out emotionally. Eventually, she packed her things, took Bree's leftover car money, and left for California with some guy she had met online. My dad only found out a few days later when he got a fraud alert from one of his bank accounts. By the time he called the credit card company, several charges had already gone through: hotel stays, online purchases, plane tickets. It was clear she had no intention of coming back. As he sat across from me explaining everything, I realized how small he looked. This man who had once seemed so strong, the one who taught me how to change a tire and keep my word, now sat hunched over, his hands trembling slightly as he admitted he had been used. He said that I was right about her all along, that she had been manipulating him for years, and that he should have listened when I tried to warn him. He said those words quietly, almost like they hurt to say. And then, for the first time in my adult life, he looked me straight in the eye and said he was sorry for letting her treat me the way she did. It wasn't dramatic or tearful, just simple, honest, and raw. But it was enough. That single apology, after all the years of silence and avoidance, felt like the weight of a decade finally being lifted. After that, I helped him get back on his feet. We went through his finances together, canceled the remaining cards, and set up automatic payments to handle what was left of the debt. I made sure he wouldn't fall for another scam or emotional manipulation again. He was embarrassed, I could tell, but also grateful. I didn't do it out of obligation. I did it because, despite everything, he was still my dad. But this time, I made it clear that things were going to be different. I told him I would help him as his son, not as his chauffeur, not as the family fixer, not as the person who cleaned up everyone else's mess. It took a few weeks, but he started to bounce back. He got a used car under his own name, one that actually fit his needs. He started seeing some of his old friends again, people Nancy had pushed away over the years. I think he was rediscovering what life felt like when it wasn't controlled by someone else's temper. As for Bree, she stayed in touch a bit, mostly through short messages checking in. She had taken some time to process everything too. She admitted in her own way that she had ignored a lot of warning signs because it was easier to believe her mom than to face the truth. I didn't hold it against her. She had grown up under Nancy's influence, and that kind of conditioning takes years to undo. A few months later, I got promoted at work. Field supervisor. It was a big step for me. A recognition of the years I had put in, the discipline I had maintained, and the integrity I refused to compromise. My team was solid, my days structured, and for the first time, my personal life felt stable. No chaos, no manipulation, no constant guilt hanging over my head. Just peace. Sometimes when I drive past that old neighborhood, I think about everything that happened. The years I spent trying to earn respect from people who never planned to give it. The endless effort to be the glue that held a family together when half of it didn't want to be fixed. And now, seeing where things ended up, I've realized that karma doesn't need interference. It just takes patience. People reveal themselves in time, and life has a way of balancing the scales without anyone lifting a finger. To this day, I keep that story as a reminder. Not out of spite, but as proof that walking away doesn't make you cold. It makes you free. I did my job. I lived by my principles. And in the end, that was enough. Because sometimes the best revenge is not anger or payback, or proving a point and letting the truth handle the rest.